Out it's easy. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody, and welcome to the fourth. This is our fourth poetry initiative, and we are doing this on raising awareness for the role of caretakers. And if you've never been a caretaker, then you will understand the pain and the suffering that a caretaker has to go through when they are with someone. We have two wonderful people, my co-host, Melissa Begley, love you, love you, love you, love you, and Mary Lynn Louise. And we are all caretakers. We have been caretakers in our life. So we'll start with Melissa, because she's so camera ready, looking beautiful today.
Well, thank you. Well, I have been a caretaker twice in my lifetime, and I will recite my poem. It's not really very poetic because it's really difficult to write something that is uplifting and inspiring when it is involving a topic such as caretaking, because it is very sad and depressing to take that journey back into the past. So my poem is titled Caretaker. I love my big old glasses. It is an unexpected journey upon becoming a caretaker. You no longer care for yourself or have the opportunity for respite time. My mother had multiple strokes. I cared for my mother for years, at least 7. My father was already in the heavenly abode. I secured a nighttime position to be with her during the daytime. I was free for her medical appointments, therapies, but sleeping was a rare treat for me. Daily lifting her from her bed to wheelchair, then assisting her into her chair in the family room was physically challenging. I did not want her to have skin breakdown, resulting in decubitus ulcers, known as bed sores. Communication is a guessing game when one has slurred speech that is not always understood. Tears would flow from my mother's eyes and mine as well. Slowly, we developed methods to communicate. It is the most embarrassing task trained on inserting a catheter into my mother to allow her bladder to empty. Constant blockages and not being able to have bowel movements, which is a very serious issue, resulted in hospitalizations. Inserting enemas became another one of my responsibilities. Surprisingly, urine and poop never bothered me, but to assist with brushing her teeth, something about the saliva and spit was nauseating to me. Her physician, our family friend, was able to have my mother admitted to a rehabilitative hospital. The plan was for her to manage living life in a wheelchair, since her diagnosis was that she would never walk again. At the rehabilitative hospital, the physical therapist and nurse set up a meeting to discuss my mother's non-compliance and refusal to ride the stationary bicycle. I laughed and informed them that my mother had never ridden a bike before, and that steps needed to train her to ride a bike had to be enacted. My mother was compliant with her therapy and driven to improve. After 6 weeks, she was discharged home on a walker. She never walked again without assistance, but was filled with much gratitude. My mother was against, there's Simon. He's applauding me. My mother was against my marriage to Ken. We dated on the weekends and at the midnight hour. I would leave my mother asleep in her bedroom. My mother was fearful that I would no longer be in her life if I married Ken, and that would result in her placement in a long-term care facility, a nursing home. She already had a housekeeper, but everything else was required so that she could live independently at home. Ken provided assistance and never complained when my mother wanted me to spend hours with her or an overnight stay. They eventually developed a very close relationship. The last words my mother spoke to me prior to her final hospitalization that resulted in a celestial discharge. Thank you for providing me half a life. Without you, I would have not been able to have any quality living. Years later, my departed husband was diagnosed with lung and brain cancer. The journey from hell was watching my beloved soulmate decline mentally and physically. Do not experience despair or decline the opportunity to become a caretaker, even though it impacts your free time and health. Keep in mind, losing a loved one is much more difficult than being a caretaker.
Oh,
I know I cried after I wrote my poem.
so sad. Oh, so sad. I'm full of pain and the feeling of what it's like to be a caretaker. Just so you feel helpless, really.
It is a feeling of helplessness because you know you can't. You're only limited to what you can do.
And then sometimes you don't know exactly what.
Oh, that's absolutely right. You don't know what to do sometimes. And
Beautiful, though. Beautiful, beautifully read and said, as always. And now, Mary Lynn.
yay.
Hey,
Okay.
we have no one else in the meeting, so we're just gonna be all three. So maybe we can do 2 poems if we.
I don't have a second poem ready.
No, we'll just talk.
Yeah,
I
we'll
don't have
just,
one either because I've got poems about, but not like this. Okay. All right. The
Okay.
title of my poem is Life's Turnaround. I was blessed by the divine, be able to spend quality time caring for the aging life that bore and nurtured me. Strong and independent, dependable and kind. Unconditional love was her character defined. Though she appeared to be all of these things most of the time, and all of her abilities were failing and beginning to decline. For the first time in my life, my mother, I needed to remind, and became dependent and afraid of losing her mind. The fear I saw in my mother's eyes on having to go to a nursing home was not something I had thought about, but now, sadly, had come to realize. I held her close, and as she cried, I dried her tears and sympathized. Life's turnaround, the day had come. We traded places. To life's circle, we succumbed. I became self-sacrificing caregiver. I was given the opportunity to show my love by the life giver. That's it.
Oh,
very sad.
very sad. Very, very sad. It's a It's such a sin.
That's exactly how it happened, you know? That's
Oh, yeah.
exactly how it happened. Trying to get this thing out of my way there. Yeah, you know, I had been in Egypt. And I realized it was time that I came home because my mother was not getting the proper care in the nursing home that she needed to have. And so I came home to take care of her. And when I did, for the first time in my life, my mother was a very strong woman, very independent woman. She was an army nurse. She was in World War II. She was a RN for all of her life, and she was a sergeant. And so she was very, very kind of. I didn't really grow up knowing her very well because she was never home. She chose to work from 3 to 11, and you know, so I never got to see her hardly at all. But during this time, and she was not one of those mothers that held you and caressed you and told you that she loved you. No, that was not my mother. But this day that I went to uh, see her at the nursing home, she had not been acting like herself. So for some reason, I took an extra, because I was staying with my brother while I was here and seeing about my mother. And I took an extra change of clothes to go see her, you know, because I was going to spend the day with her. And when I was in her room and I was getting ready to leave because we had talked, we had a good time and all that, she stood up. And for the first time in my life, she grabbed me and she said, "Mary Lynn, I need you." I said,
Oh,
"Mom," I said, "I'm here." She said, "No, you don't understand. I need you here with me." I said, "You want me to stay here with you?" She said, "Honey, I really do need you." And see, until that time, all of us thought she was perfectly capable of taking care of her life things. Well, in just a matter of days, well, anyway, I said, "Okay, Mom, whatever you want. If you really want me to stay here with you, I will do that," because a caregiver, even though she was in a retirement home, she had that long-term insurance. A caregiver could stay in the same apartment with her, you know. So that's what I ended up doing. But in just a few days, I found out my mother was way in debt. People
oh,
were taking advantage of her,
They'll
you
do that.
know, that I had no idea.
Yep.
Banks, people charging her for things that she didn't get. I mean, it was awful, and we had no idea. We had
oh,
no idea.
well, that's just unbelievable. That's just like that's what happens when somebody is weak and unable to defend themselves. The outside world will attack them. It's really sad.
And you know,
So,
another thing too, and this is something I really wanted to say because so many people don't really know this. Um, when my mother would try to get on the phone to make a telephone call, and then she would get transferred to this one, to this one, to this one, to this one, she ended up not even knowing what she was doing. You know, she could not get to where she wanted to be. And you know, one of the biggest old age people, you know, things is the AARP. You know, and so much of that, boy, when I tried to take care of some of her business and I had to get a hold of them and they transferred me and transferred me and transferred me, I became almost furious. And I thought, oh my God, what are all these people doing? How are they managing this? It's hard for me at my age. How in the world does someone like this, how can they do this? You know, unreal, unreal.
Yeah, my
well,
mother had people that took advantage of her. but they did not come and visit her once she became homebound, even, close loved ones. And Ken, he had declined mentally because of his brain cancer, and he donated a lot of money to different organizations and groups. And believe me, they zoomed in on that and they really took advantage of him until I had to just take away any type of financial resources and not let him have access to anything. And that's very difficult to do, especially since, Ken was a military officer, very independent, very much of a manly man, very much of my protector. But I have to say that when I had to notify the Army and, receive assistance with them, to continue on as Ken's retirement, his annuity, every time I contacted the Army from the time that he passed away and until everything got resolved, immediately I would get response and assistance. So I have to give a big applaud to the military, the Army, because they provided so much assistance and so much compassion. And I even cried like a baby to one person, and they were just very consoling. So, but I understand, Mary Lynn, they take advantage. People take advantage, and the worst is people that know them.
Yes.
The worst.
So, yeah,
I do believe in bad karma.
yes, I do too. And so I am going to read from my book.
Okie doke. Sorry to keep you waiting.
No, this is from my book. And it's in the chapter called His Illness, section called His Illness. This is a photo of my husband during the time that he was not as well as he should have been, but we still took a photo of him. And it's called A Complex Man. Beneath the surface is the man he once was, leaping through life on 2 healthy feet, jumping to play basketball, arms strong to hold me close. Beneath his surface, the young man lies, face unlined with his arrogant eyes and soft lips, mouthing the phrases young men use to entice women. Beneath his eyes is the man who once inhabited this body, virile and strong, eager to catch life in his teeth, looking for adventure around every turn. Each day a new place, spacing his moments, dreaming of a freedom he saw somewhere out there in the distance, planning for the future, always looking to tomorrow, not seeing today. His days are now filled with doctor appointments and long hours spent sitting on his leather chair with feet defeated by the disease that is silently destroying him. And though try as he might, it will not subside. He lives with the 4-toed feet and accepts the wounds caused by his need to ingest the steroid that keeps him aware and holds back the sarcoidosis, injects himself with life-saving insulin, and holds back the truth of how he feels. When asked how does he feel, his answer is always, fine, great, couldn't be better. The mix of medication, a cocktail it takes 5 doctors to keep balanced. Beneath the hazel eyes I know so well is the youth he once was, and in dreams, his feet move running through the city streets as he did as a boy.
Oh, nice.
And
It is very difficult, I think, especially for men when they have to, encounter medical appointments and
he had machines every time he had his he had to have his toe amputated. He had to have his middle toe and little toe amputated on both feet. And because of that, every time they gave him this machine that they attached to him to take care of the infection.
A wound back machine.
Yes. And he would walk around with it and he'd go to court with it. And it was amazing. And we got used to the sound. And he was just one of those people, he didn't need a caretaker, but he needed someone to take care of him. And so I took care of him, making sure that he and my daughters we both took care of him. And then he got so sick. And just we put him in the hospital. I mean, it was the ER, and then he never came back home. Never. Just woke up one night and said, I can't turn over. And he had an accident in bed, and I called the ER, the EMTs, and they came and they picked him up. They actually picked him up and put him in a wheelchair. And I had never seen him in that condition, and it was very scary. And never saw him again at home. So I lost him that night, really. Yeah, it was very hard. And, being a caretaker, I went to the hospital to see him as much as possible. And then I went to rehab as much as possible to see him, and made sure that everything was taken care of for him, because in the hospital, there was one time when he had, before this all happened, like 8 years before this, he had a heart attack and then bypass surgery. And at that time, he lost cognitive ability because of ICU delirium, and because of the medication and so forth. And he just lost cognitive ability, and they wanted to transfer him to the VA because the VA was where he should have been. But I said, no, you can't do that. I said, you can't do that. You just can't do that. And so I was trying to get power of attorney. And the psychologist came in to check on his cognitive ability. And when they asked him the date, he said, oh, it's 1964 or 63. And where are you? I'm in Vietnam. He thought that he was in a concentration camp in Vietnam. And he kept telling me he wanted me to take him home, that I should come, and that I would, and we would do it. He would escape. And I was like, now I understand why. And it was very scary until he regained his ability. That was very scary, but being in that position is terrifying. And then there were so many times when we almost lost him, and sleeping in the hospital in the waiting room, and just a lot of very sad experiences goes along with being a caretaker, I know. And so we can explore those, or we can explore the moments that you want to talk about. So anybody want to start?
Well, I do. As my mother's caregiver, my mother did the same thing that you said your husband did. She was in the hospital for a few days because of having an infection. And she did that same thing to us. She called us in the middle of the night and said, you got to come get me. I'm they're going to get me. They're going to get me. We got to go. We got to go. We got to escape right now. See,
Exactly.
she was reliving being in the Aleutian Islands during the Second World War, and she thought she was going to be captured by the Japanese, and she was desperate, she was going to go out of there. We had to go now, but getting back to being a caretaker, though, it's very, very hard on a caretaker. And my experience was, even though she had sisters came to see her, even though I had brothers came to see her, and they had wives that came to see her, nobody came to help me.
Absolutely.
Nobody. There was a period there
Been there, done that.
I did not get to take a shower. No kidding. And don't judge me for it. For almost 3 weeks, because I could not leave my mother in the chair, that she would not come and try to find me. I would say, Mom, I'm going to go take a shower. You sit right here and I'll be right back, And I'd no sooner get in the bathroom to take a shower, and I would hear her coming down the hall. Well, I couldn't, you can't trust them. You can't. And she was not bad enough that I could tie her in or anything like that. And I certainly didn't want to do that. I didn't want to do that at all. And then one day, her sister and I, if they're watching, I'm sorry, people, but you need to know this. One of her sisters came, and she came at I think it was like 2:00 in the afternoon, something like that, to stay where they were. Normally, that when they came, they would only stay like half an hour and then they'd be gone, Well, this particular day, I couldn't stand it anymore. I was taking spit baths, but my God, that's not like taking a shower. And anyway, I said, Aunt so-and-so, do you have any plans for the next hour? And she said, no. She said, what can I do? I said, well, and I told her, I said, I need to take a shower. I need for you to stay here and talk to Mom until I can come back out. So she did. She stayed, Well, why did I have to ask? Why did, that's what I mean. And I, I'm not one that will ask to, and really, we need to. We really need to. When we see that people are not coming to, and sometimes they just don't think. They don't think. But to get some sleep, like Melissa said in her poem, sleep is a precious thing that we don't get. We don't get it all. My mother would sleep all day in the chair, in the living room. She would sleep on and off all day long. And then she would go to bed and she'd be up many, many times during the night. And of course, you learn to listen quick. You can hear, just like a baby's cry, you can hear that, and it wakes you up immediately. Even getting to sleep sometimes was very hard, because you just knew you were going to hear something pretty quick and you couldn't go to sleep. So by the time that my mother was no longer here, I looked older than she did.
Yes, it ages us. It definitely does.
Oh man, it was terrible.
Yeah.
In fact, my brother, who was in he was in the service, and he was special forces. So we never knew when he was going to come or anything like that, because he couldn't tell us anything like that. He couldn't take pictures of us. I had no contact with him, but he would show up at the door, and one day he came to the door, and I said, hi, and he came in and he looked at me. He says, Mary Lynn, what is the matter with you? What's going on? And I said, Richard, I'm just so tired. I'm just so tired. He says, well, this has got to end. He says, you can't do this anymore. I'm going to give you 3 weeks to get this squared away. And if something can't be done, you're not going to be doing this anymore, because this is killing you. And that was true. That was very true. Very true. And the
Did
other
you hire
brother
a nurse?
agreed
Did
to
he
stay.
hire a nurse then to take care of her?
No, no,
No,
God took care of it. But
you never had a nurse to help you? No.
no, they
Yeah,
would come in and you know, and this is another thing about these long care facilities where you have this insurance. You know, it's called assisted living. Then you go from that to some kind of care, and then to another kind of care. But anyway, once you get to that, when you get out of that assisted living, well, I'll tell you what, you better have somebody there taking care of you. Better
absolutely.
have somebody who looks at you all the time, because they come in to give you your food, and if you're not right there, they'll set it down and leave it. I mean, it's unreal. And
Like the
I'm not.
hospital, it's just like the hospital, exactly like a hospital. If you're not there to take care of a person who could not take care of themselves, then that person is in trouble.
And you need to, when you go, you know, when you go, you need to change the times that you go. You don't need to be going at the same time every day. You need to see what's going on at different times of the day. It's very important, very important.
Well, I was a solo act for my mother and for Ken. And it's amazing to me that people don't give a rat's ass when somebody becomes homebound. They might love them, but they're not there. And to see the pain in my mother's eyes was very overwhelming to me. And with Ken, his family lived in Texas and Arkansas. But you know, it's just a shame. And I know there's karma, and I don't hold any grudges against them, but I just know what kind of pain that they created. And you know, watching Ken, you know, with my mother, there was a lot of physical assistance, and she did regain much of her speech after rehabilitation, which was very good. And but with Ken, it was a mental decline. You know, he was in a lot of pain, a lot of excruciating pain. And there's some things I did for him, like keep his port clean and help doing, you know, simple tasks. But the mental decline was terrible. I mean, I would go out someplace and I'd come home and I'd say, "What's that smell?" He caught the stove on fire 3 times. He caught the oven on fire 1 time, and he caught another electrical appliance on fire. And it just got so that I was not able to leave Ken alone at all. And I would say, "What happened, Ken?" And then he decided that he wanted to do some remodeling in the house. So you would not believe the mess that the poor man left me. That's going to take some money to, you know, take care of it. But I never fussed at him because I knew he had brain cancer. I never, you know, said you shouldn't have done that. I never said, you know, why did you do that? I just would say it'll all work out. But he knew before he went unconscious at the hospital, he said to me, he says, "Baby doll, I left you in a mess."
Oh,
And he knew, because, you know, it's kind of like with an Alzheimer's patient or somebody with dementia. They know some things, but they don't know everything. And it's just horrible. And yeah, I worked 2 years in long-term care before I switched over to hospitals, because I would go home almost crying every night because I knew that they were not being rendered the care that they deserved. And I can guarantee you that when Ken was a patient, and I already spent almost 20 years as a patient ombudsman, a patient advocate, knew all the rules and regulations, state, federal, Medicare, Medicaid, insurance guidelines. And I would let the people know, "Oh," they'd say, "What did you do?" And I'd say, "Oh, I was a patient ombudsman." So I would make sure that I let people know that I wasn't somebody that they better mess around with. And you know, there's a couple times I did have to complain. And I did complain after Ken, a few months after Ken was discharged, because I did not think that he was provided the care that he deserved, because he was supposed to be transferred to the hospice unit at the hospital. There was no beds available. So he was on this unit with these little young nurses. They were all very young. And I'm sure they had never taken care of an older patient that was dying. And he was on a lot of medical equipment that would buzz into the nurse's station, like when his oxygen levels was declining. One night his oxygen level started to decline and I pushed the button. Nobody came.
Mhm.
I pushed the button, we'll be there. And then when the oxygen level declined to 70, I jumped up, went out in the hallway, and I said, you need to get in here now. And I did report that, and nobody seemed to give a rat's ass. That's why I did file official complaints, a few months after I could get my, emotions together. And but I tell you what, there's, his cancer care was fantastic. His chemo nurses was fantastic. His radiation therapy care was fantastic. All those people were fantastic. His emergency room care was fantastic. But his last hospitalization was horrible. Very, very cold-hearted, uncaring people.
I know. Unfortunately, we, like I said, he went from hospital to rehab. And at first he was at Burke, which was a really good rehab center. And he was very alert and aware at that time. And he really liked it there. And then he got pneumonia. And he went to the hospital again. And the hospital couldn't put him back in Burke because they didn't have any room for him. So we had to put him into another place. And this place was not as nice as Burke. It did not have the kind of facilities as Burke, but it was still okay. It was closer to our house. And he liked it. He was doing fine there. And then he got pneumonia again. So we put him in Greenwich Hospital. And the first time we put him there, he got a really great room. It was beautiful. He got great care. Then they sent him back to the original, to the other home, the Greenwich home. And he was okay, but then he got pneumonia again. And then we put him back in the hospital. And this time they put him in a facility where he fell. The person he was not very steady. So the person who was holding him had let him go. And then he fell. So they put him in this room where they had a TV on and they had a bed that had an alarm. And every time he was about to get out of bed, they would say, no, you can't get out of bed without a nurse. And the alarm would ring. So he was, in this condition. And then after that, he went back to the nursing home and they put him back in. And then he was okay in the nursing home, not that great. And then he got pneumonia again. And this time it was worse because they would leave him in a chair. I would come and I'd find that he'd been in the chair like half a day. Just half a day.
Taking him down.
They didn't even change his top. He wasn't, his gown wasn't changed. It was all food stains. And I was just like, what the hell? What's going on? And the worse he got, the worse treatment he received in that place. And I just, wanted to get him out. Finally, we got him out of there and we got him back to Burke, but it was too late. They had done something to him in the hospital. I don't know what they did. they gave him some kind of medication, but whatever it was just made him decline further and further and further. And at Berkeley, they didn't say why, but suddenly one day they called me, they said he was not doing well. He had a temperature and he wasn't doing well, and he was shaking. His hands were all like shaking, and nobody knew why.
They probably gave him the
Didn't know
wrong
why.
medication. They probably gave him the wrong medication.
Nobody knew why, but we had to put
Yeah.
him back in the hospital. I put him back in the hospital that I trusted, but by then he was having breathing problems. He was on the CPAP, and then finally they moved him up to ICU, and then they tried to do a bronchoscopy on his lungs, but they couldn't get it all out. So they had to put him on a respirator for that. And then they kept him on the respirator. And then it was just in days that we lost him because his heart was so destroyed. And that experience as his caretaker, as his wife, as, with my children, it was so devastating to see the decline of this wonderful, strong man. And we just, we just couldn't believe it. Anyway.
Well, it's so, it happens. And, one of the things with my mother, like you're saying, these strong people, I mean, she was the strongest woman that I knew, and of course, a lot of that rubbed off on me, it really rubbed off on me. Now, when I was taking care of her, my mother was supposed to be on a salt-free diet. And these are things we have to watch out for, and they would send her up food I couldn't even eat. I mean, potato chips, hot dogs, things like
On
this.
a salt-free diet.
What I ended up doing, I ended up taking pictures of all the food that they were sending up. I documented everything. And then I went down to the manager and I said, hey, does this look like a salt-free diet to you? He said, no, it sure doesn't. Where did this go? And anyway, after a period of doing this for almost 2 months, like Melissa, I started being an advocate. And do you know, in just a few months, I closed that place down. I mean, I
Wow.
closed it down. Yeah. I mean, closed it down because my mother, first of all, I was in the bathroom, and which was in a separate place, and my mother was in the, and I could hear everything. My mother was in her chair, and there was a maintenance man that came in, and because an alarm had gone, I had baked, I forget what it was I had in the oven, had baked in the oven. It caused the alarm to go off.
Oh, no.
Okay? Yeah, it caused an alarm to go off. Now, this was a day before, okay, the day before. And I had already told the lady, well, evidently that thing is too close to, because all I did was open the oven, to look at the thing, and closed it back up, and the alarm went off. Well, anyway, so she knew what it was and that I was there. Well, anyway, when I went when I was in the bathroom, like I said, and she was in her chair, the maintenance man came in. Now, what he was going to do was unplug the stove so that it couldn't be used. Yeah, now get this. I'm in the bathroom, and he says to my mother, you're not going to be able to use that stove anymore. You're not capable of doing it. And he just was all over my mother about this. And I listened for a minute, and I got it recorded. And I went out to him. I said, who are you? He told me who you were. Well, I'm going to tell you what. I heard every word you said. And that was not my mother that did that. That was me. And it was not an accident at all. That thing needed to be. And how dare you insult my mother that way and threaten her? So anyway, I ended up reporting it. But what I did, I also called the police. I called the cops. And I told them what it was. I said, my mother is being abused, absolutely mentally abused. That wasn't the first time, but that was the last time. And anyway, the cops came. Okay. Now get this. Cops came and sat down and started asking me questions. And he said to me, he said, well, if you don't like this place, why don't you move? That's what the cops said. I said, you know what? I just heard an advertisement by the police department on TV that if you allow someone to be abused, you are as bad as they are. I said, is that the way you feel about it? You think I should move because my mother was being abused? Boy, you talk about an attitude change in a hurry. It turned around like that, you know. And in sight of, I would say 2 minutes, he said, who is the name of the person downstairs that I need to go talk to, you know? And yeah, in less than a month, they shut the place down. They shut it down. And it went into some kind of a selling mode or whatever. And it changed hands and all this stuff. But I'm telling you, we have to be advocates for our people. We have to be, you know. And it's not fun. It's not fun. It really it takes a strong-willed person to hang in there, you know. It really does. So that was my experience, but I never will regret having done that at all. In fact, my relationship with my mother became so strong, and I appreciated her and understood her a whole lot more after staying with her as a caregiver. I understood my mother for the first time in my life.
Yeah, well, it's a heartrending experience to be a caretaker. And I was always making sure that they took care of my husband and gave him food and whatever and did what they were supposed to do with him. And I was always talking to the people, always talking to the nurses, always.
Razzie, he's trying to tear up my computer.
Yeah. Oh, you dog. Hello.
I guess he wants to be on the Zoom meeting.
We don't let our dog, we have gated our bedroom area off from our dog because he was unfortunately peeing on doors. So we we took care of that problem and we gated our bedroom area off from the dog.
Yeah, I have the back of the house gated so the dogs can't get back there.
Yeah, you have to. I think being a caretaker for a dog is another experience that we haven't talked about, but yeah.
Well, I think the worst thing that happened to me when Ken was in the hospital was, he'd already passed and they had to clean him up. And I knew when he was in the hospital, I took everything home, his wallet, identifications, everything, clothing. I didn't take the shoes because I was hoping he'd wear them home. But I didn't even realize it until later on that somebody removed his wedding ring.
Oh my.
Oh my goodness.
And I did file a complaint about that because my heart is broken to think that somebody took a ring off of a dead man's hand. That is just the most pathetic thing that a person can do. And I do hold grudges about that. And
No, that's terrible.
And I just cannot believe what people will do. And but I have to say that the chemo nurses all loved Ken. When he would come in for chemo, it was almost like they would fight over who got to take care of Ken because he is very charismatic And when he had his birthday and he walked in, they knew, and the nurses all surrounded him and sung happy birthday to him. They would hug on Ken. They loved him so much. And, I would just sit back and let him, have all the attention because he's very charismatic and he enjoyed that. Of course, as time went on, his personality did change, but that was early on. But people need to not talk at patients. They need to talk with patients. People need not to, talk at their family members. They need to talk with them. And it's just, we still have the very best medical care in the world. The United States does, but there are still a lot of areas that need improvement. And it's just horrible not only to be a caretaker, but it's horrible to have someone you love in the hands of other people. Fox. That's Foxy.
It's true. It's very true. And you feel very helpless at times. And especially if the person is strong, it's very difficult to be a caretaker for a strong person because they still have their personality and they still want things done the way they want them done. and they get disturbed if they aren't done the way they want them done. And I remember my husband, when he first had his heart attack, when he was able to be, able to talk to me when I went in to speak to him before he was there in the hospital, Westchester Medical Center. And first of all, they wanted to transfer him to the VA. And there was an ombudsman there who I went to see. And they as soon as I went to see them and explained the situation, that he was in an emergency and that if he went to the VA, he'd have to wait months to get an operation and he needed an emergency operation. The ombudsman did whatever they did, because when I got down to his room, the doctor's aide was there taking care of him, making sure they got the information they needed for the operation, for the pre-op. And then the doctor came in to look at him. So he had been in a room for a day, nobody had seen him at all. And then suddenly the doctor came in and everything was in preparation for the operation the following day. So you have to be an advocate for your patient, very important. And during that time, he had me come in with a notebook because he had all this information he wanted to give me about his cases, what people, what was needed for each case. And he had me write down all this information so that he could give it, to the person who was taking over his cases. He was in the hospital. He had just had a heart attack and he was thinking about his business.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what us patient ombudsmen do. We expedite the process. We diffuse
I was so
complaints.
happy.
And and I think because I was a caretaker of my mother, I learned the compassionate side in me was probably beneficial as a patient ombudsman. But then at the same time, believe it or not, sometimes patients do not always tell the truth. And that can be such as, maybe a patient comes in, they're in the stroke unit, they state they can't move their left arm, the whole left side, they cannot barely talk is what their family member tells you, but they are on camera. And as soon as everybody leaves the room, they're up and about doing this and that. And So this does happen. So you had to make sure that there was a balance, to protect the hospital, the physicians, the nurses, but protect the patient and expedite the process and make sure that issues and concerns were addressed to their satisfaction, So I learned that, yeah, sometimes, it's not what it seems, but most of the time it's legitimate.
No, I was very, very thankful to that ombudsman
Yes,
who expedited it so wonderfully that it happened before I even got to the room, that it had happened, and it was just like up a couple of floors and then down. So it happened very quickly. And, you know,
Well,
I
they
was,
helped me with who to call and what to do, the process I should go through, They were very helpful that way, but there was only so much they could do, but then I had to do it because I had all the proof, and I'm so glad I'm a picture taker. I really, because that sealed it, and not only was it for my mother, if my mother was being treated this way with me there as a 24/7 caregiver, what was happening to these people who had nobody
awful,
in the same place,
they're being
awful.
neglected. They're being neglected and abused. That's what was happening.
That's what happens if you don't have somebody to take care of you
Yep.
and make sure that everything works, and you're not able to be cognitive enough to show, them that maybe, you might say something. If they think that you're not going to say anything, they're not going to treat you like a human being.
Absolutely.
And it's really shocking how many
And
places.
it's so good, when you have the people that are there, they're there because they want to be. They're there because they care. But there's a difference altogether with those that are there just for a paycheck.
So I'll tell you, what in the same place where my husband was, he was moved to closer to the desk area, okay, and they would bring these people in wheelchairs to just sit around in this desk area to wait for dinner. They would just put them there just to sit around and wait. There wasn't a TV, there wasn't magazines, there wasn't anyone to talk to them. They would just put them there and let them sit. And I would have to walk by them because my husband was close to that area. And I would see them every single time I visited him. And just like nobody talked to them. Occasionally a doctor or somebody would come by, or someone would come by and say, "Hey, how you doing?" And they, they were not able to talk, even some of them, but still not leaving them in that condition in an open area without anyone. It was wrong.
Well, the majority of my friends are nurses, so I'm lucky, and I know how caring that they are. But there's so many pathetic people in healthcare, and sitting those people out like that, it seems to me like it would almost be a violation of their privacy, because if a visitor came in that knew them, they would know that they were in the hospital, and that is private information, and that also is a
It was not a hospital. It was a care
rehab,
facility. Yeah,
assisted living facility.
yeah, not assisted. It was more.
Rehab,
It was a
rehab,
rehab, and they had
but you
the
still would have
the
you'd
very
still,
long term were up on top.
but you'd still have patient confidentiality.
Oh, they should have.
Yeah, it would still come under that. And that is not respecting their patient confidentiality or resident patient confidentiality.
Yeah, And it was really sad. It was just like,
It's humiliating. It's undignified to
yes,
treat them like that.
yes. And I'd make sure that, that everything was working for him. Before I left, I'd always be talking with the head of the place to make sure that everything was working for him. And he was just one of those people that talked to everyone and they loved him.
Ken was like that too.
Just
Very charismatic.
loved him. All the nurses loved him. And just actually in the hospital when he was dying, the woman who had been his CPAP person had been so taken with him. She came from another floor to come see him. It's just one of those people. And having to care for someone in a situation like that is horrible, but you two are to be commended, Mary Lynn, Melissa, for having gone through such an experience and coming out on the other side as stronger and more, competent women. And I would have to say that is what happened to me too. After that happened, I felt stronger, more capable of taking care of everyone who I knew. And I knew a lot more about hospitals.
Well, I learned a lot too during that time. And I was talking to Melissa earlier too, there are things now that if I could go back and change them, I would change them. There are things that my mother was not allowed to do by the doctors, was told not to do. But if I had it to do over again, I would let her do them. They were important to her, and she was 7 days from turning 90 when she died. And that's a good long life, And she actually fell asleep in her chair. And I wrote a poem about that, my last visit to my mother in the rehab before she did die. And you just learn from those things, It's not a handbook. You can't say this is what I'm going to do, or if that happened to me, this is what I would do. You can't do that. It comes as you are there, but I know, at 90 years old, now, if my mama wanted a piece of pie, I would definitely let her have a piece of pie. Those kind of things. Those kind of things, I would definitely.
Yeah, Ken had incurable cancer, so we knew that, his brain and lung cancer would not be reversed. But because he was so healthy with his organs and lab work and everything, that they went ahead and pursued the radiation therapy and the chemotherapy just to keep things at bay. But we were always told that it would be recurring, so it would have to be constant, But, he was weakening, and, with chemo, you don't have much of an appetite. And of course, these little nutritionists, they come and say, this is what you need to eat. This is healthy. This is what you do, blah, 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 blah. No sweets, which, as Mary Lynn stated, and I know as well, sweets, cancer feeds on sweets. But the only thing that Ken could actually eat where he would not be nauseated was vanilla ice cream with chocolate syrup.
Oh.
And I let him eat as much as he wanted, because like Mary Lynn, when my mother, I took care of her for almost 7 years, or maybe over 7 years, I was restrictive about and adhered to the dietary rules, adhered to this, adhered to that. But with Ken, it's just like, you know what? I know his time on earth, we've already been told, could be it could be today would be the last day. 4 months would be the last day. We already know it's not going to be a year. So whatever he wanted, I let him have. Because his happiness was much more important to me than some little nutritionist telling me, this is what he needs to do. It's just like, yeah, yeah, textbook style, not real life style.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. But it's amazing how many people are caretakers right now and don't discuss it.
They
I'm-
probably don't have time to discuss it.
I know, being a caretaker, you don't. And I was watching this baking show, and this woman came on, and she looked perfect. By perfect, I mean beautiful, very well put together, and anything. And she said, "Oh, my daughter is out there in the audience," and it was an outside thing, and she was outside. She said she's in the wheelchair. She has autism. And my whole thought about this woman changed. She was taking care of an autistic daughter. And, that kind of thing, there are so many people who are taking care of children who are either autistic or mentally disabled or physically disabled, or people who are physically disabled. And it's caretaking is something that is a gesture of love.
Yeah.
And you come to it with a feeling of love, and the entire experience is filled with love. Because what else would you be doing? You're taking care of a loved one, and you're making sure that whatever days they have left are comfortable and that they are having the best life they can at the moment. And you two, what you did was amazing. I mean, Mary Lynn, you taking care of your mom, and Melissa taking care of your mother, and then your husband, just so much love.
You're exactly right. You live in the moment. You're not thinking about yesterday. You're not thinking about tomorrow. You live in the moment.
Right.
So many people write poetry about that, and they don't really know what it's like to live in the moment.
Yeah. I
It's
mean,
it's metaphorical to a lot of people.
right. And being a patient is not easy. I've been a patient a number of times, and it's not easy. When I had my knee done, I had to be a patient, and I had to depend on my children to take care of me. And I found out which one was the one that I could depend on. And it's my older daughter, Rachel, who is the one that I can depend on. Even though she has health anxiety herself, she is a wonderful caretaker. She is the one that takes care of me even now. The dog, unfortunately, see this, the dog, she got him a cool bed. In other words, something you can lay on the floor, and it has cooling properties if a dog lays on it. But our dog did not know what to do with this thing. And he started tearing at it and biting at it and biting at it. I put my hand down to try to stop him, and he just kind of scraped along my hand, and it started to bleed. And my daughter said, "Oh no, Mom." And she rushed me to the bathroom to get, to take care of it. So she's my caretaker. And she took care of me when I had COVID too.
My daughter did me too. We're lucky to have daughters.
We are lucky to have
They,
daughters.
they are caregivers. I
Yeah.
worry about her because She doesn't have a daughter. She has all the men in her house. So.
Well, you know, I recommend for everybody that lives in the United States of America, I don't know about foreign countries, that you have a living will, medical surrogates, people, advance directives, actual will for your, possessions, power of attorney to include a financial power of attorney. And Ken and I had all that in place. I've got that in place now, but I do have to change a few things. I don't have to change my will, but I have to change everything else about, the people that, will make medical decisions for me if I become incognitive. So those things people need to have early. I'm talking about as soon as you get married, or if you're 20 years of age, you need to have these things done.
Yeah.
Because you don't know if somebody's going to be in a trauma accident, in a motor vehicle accident, trauma accident. You don't know if you're going to slip and fall and hit your head. You do not know these things. So this type of documents need to be taken care of. And I just need to update a couple of my documents. And a lot of people don't realize that, we did it through our attorney, but a lot of people can get those type of documents at a hospital from the social worker department. But it's very important that you plan ahead of time for, something that might happen to your loved one and something that might happen to you. And it's, yeah, because I know when one day, before Ken went unconscious, I walked into his room. There was a room full of nurses and a couple nurse techs, and they were telling me what was the plan and that Ken had agreed upon it. And I said, really? I said, you mean somebody that's on narcotics 24/7 with brain cancer, you're letting him make decisions? Well, yeah, he said this, that, and the other.
Oh, no.
So I whipped out my paperwork from my bag and I said, see this? I will be making the decisions. I have all the legal documents here. You can make copies. I will not make any decisions until his oncologist consults with me and determines what the next step is. So that's what happened.
I want to interject something
Yeah.
too. I told you that my mother fell asleep in her chair and went to be with the Lord. She really did. That's what happened. But they had moved her out of one room into another room, and they forgot to take the sign over her bed that said, do not resuscitate.
Oh.
Yeah, that's an important little sign.
And you know what? It broke my heart because that's what I've been praying for. That's what I pray for myself, that happens to me. But I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, she had fallen asleep in her chair and they came in and found her. They put her in the bed and they called the doctor. And he had to do it because there was no sign there. But what really irritated me was that was the same doctor that had been with her in the hospital, in the rehab, in the last room that she was in, and still he did it.
But it should have been documented in her medical records, though.
But they didn't. They didn't have it. They did not have it at that moment. And somebody went ahead without looking at that stuff. Yeah. And so she had to go through that.
When my husband was dying, that day that he passed away, he got up and now they had asked me a couple of days before, when he was cognizant, to ask him if he wanted to be. They said his lungs are very bad and his heart is very bad, and we don't think that he's going to last much longer. And it didn't really register with me that I was going to lose him. But I went to him and I said, the doctor wants to know, do you want to be resuscitated. And he gave me an answer I didn't expect. He said, yes. He said, yes, I want to be here. If they can try, I want to live. And I was shocked because I didn't expect it. And I told the doctors, I said, yes, please resuscitate him. Well, when it turned out a couple of days later that his defibrillator did not have a charge when he needed it. And then he passed away. And they immediately went to him and tried to resuscitate him, but his heart was not strong enough. They tried everything. They even put a wire inside his heart to try to do it. And it still did not help. And so when I came to the hospital, that's what they were trying to do. They were trying to resuscitate him, and they were working on him. And then he passed away. And he had wanted to live. He had wanted to live. But here's a funny story. It's not funny, but it's funny in a way. They always let you see the body before they, take it away. So he had one of those beds where it was like slanted, and they hadn't moved it down. So they put him in the bed. I went into the room to look, and there's no person there. What had happened was he had slid all the way down to the bottom of the bed. I went to tell them that he wasn't there, and they went back and they said, oh my God, we're so sorry. We didn't change the angle of the bed, and he slid down. I said, oh my God, even in death, I had to be taking care of him.
Yeah, that's one thing that Ken had told me before he was unable to communicate and went into a coma, that he went through the chemo and radiation therapy because he wanted to be with me. He always called me his baby doll. I wanted to be with my baby doll, and I fought and fought.
Yeah, he just didn't want to leave. He didn't want to leave us.
Then, with Hal, Ken, they don't want to leave us because they love us so much. And they know our world changes when they're that strong personality type male. They know because they've encountered so much in their life, different experiences, that they know.
Well, yeah, he took care of his mother. His
Just
mother
life,
was dying of cancer, and
but just life experiences where they have to be tougher than what females are acclimated to be. And so they understand the toughness of life, and they did not want, Ken didn't want me to put me in a situation where I would have to, deal with people and deal with tough situations and make decisions that he always made. So it was more like life experiences that I can say Ken knew better than me because of being a military officer, owning his own businesses, and being a highly intelligent person. So, these are things that I did not do, and so that's what I'm referring to.
yeah, I think he wanted to be there just to be there. I mean, he just didn't want to lose us. And I think, we were almost married. We were married almost 50 years. So, it's very, and I knew him over 50 years. So losing me was losing his life, to him, it was losing his life. And we constantly talked, we constantly were with each other, even up to the almost very end. And he said goodbye to us the night before, and I kind of felt that it was a goodbye, but I just felt, well, maybe he's, just feeling that he loves us. He wants to tell us, but I never really put it in my head that I was going to lose him. It was never like, oh, it's going to happen one day. It's going to, that he'll be lost, because it never crossed my mind that I'd ever lose him. And when it did, it was like,
Yep.
it was unreal. It's a
And
real.
like in my situation now, my mother was old. She lived a good long life. And but I think there comes a time that because that day, the day before, like I was telling you about, I had been there, I had visited her, and I said, okay, Mom, which was my habit. Okay, Mom, I'm going to go now. And I go over and I give her a kiss, and then I'd walk to the door and I'd turn around and look at her and I'd say, well, Mom, I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye. And she said, oh, you will? I said, oh, yeah, I will. She says, well, come here. Give me another kiss. I said, Mom, I just gave him. That's okay. That one just kind of flew over me, flew by me. That's what she said. It flew by me. I said, okay. So I went over and I gave her a hug and a kiss again. And I turned around and went back to the door. Hey, I'll see you tomorrow, But tomorrow never came. Tomorrow never came. And I think my mother knew, because she had never done that before. She had never done it. So I think in her way of knowing, or whatever, I think she sensed the last was there.
That's why I think my husband said his goodbyes to us the night before, because he knew too. That whole week, he thought he was dying. He told me he had a dream that he died, and he was very scared, and he was very scared of that. And then he somehow made his peace, and then said goodbye to us. And the following, and I remember it was very hard, because he was barely talking, and his hands were shaking, and he was really in bad shape. And so I fed him whatever dinner he could eat. And then he said goodbye to all of us. And I knew, I kind of knew, but we didn't know. It was like we knew, but we didn't know. And I went home and I thought, oh, he'll be better tomorrow. And he was better in the morning. They said he got up, he was good. And then he took a nap. He got back up, and then he wasn't good. He went back to sleep, and he slept. That was it. Fell asleep. And that I'm glad he did just go in his sleep, because I wouldn't have wanted him to be in pain.
Well, that feeling of hope was with Ken as well, because we already knew he had an incurable cancer, but there would be so much progress and positive results from the chemo, the radiation therapy, that it does not sink in that they have a death sentence. We knew, because they had told us blatantly that, it might be today, it might be tomorrow, it might be 6 months. So we knew that, but never did I grasp that day would come. Never. And yeah, Ken said goodbye to me before he went into his coma and unconscious, and was not able to communicate. And yeah.
Okay. I think we're about at the end of this. I think everyone should just say one word, or one sentence or a few sentences about being a caretaker, and then we'll think about our next project for next month, which I hopefully will be on time for. So sorry I was late to this one, but
Well, kept it more intimate. It kept it more intimate.
Yes, very wonderful company. So we'll start with you, Melissa.
Well, as I stated at the end of my poem, that, do not despair, do not get depressed, because the person dying is much more difficult than being a caretaker, and that you should always be there for your loved one. And yeah, you're going to have to, give up a lot, your time, your freedom, friends. I lost a lot of friends during my mom's sickness because, I was tied to her. And even with Ken, my friends were a different set of friends, but they still were very supportive of me. So, things change, life goes on. But I tell you what, I would give $1 million, $10 million, $1 billion if today I could be their caretaker again. Because that's, to me, I'd rather be with them than not be with them.
Yes, I agree. And Mary Lynn?
Well, I'm going to take it from a different standpoint, not from me, but a caregiver, help them. They're sleep deprived. So if you've got an hour or two that you can go and be with that person that they're taking care of, and let them go, even maybe just get outside and take a walk, or go shopping, or for Pete's sakes, be able to lay down and take a nap, to sleep for a little while, or whatever they need to do. Give them that time. It would be so appreciated. It really would. It really, really would. So that would be my advice. If you know a caregiver, care enough to give them a little bit of freedom to do something they can't do normally.
Well, that was wonderful advice. And I would just say that I would not want to go through that experience again. It was very difficult to see my husband in that condition. And yet I like the closeness of it. We were very close. He was very loving and supportive and of me. I remember how he was, and if I had to do it over again for someone, I would do it because it's very important. Right now we have a puppy. Not quite the same caregiver experience, but being a caregiver to a puppy or a dog is a similar experience, especially puppies. I am not the primary caregiver, so I did not have to go through the sleeplessness, but whatever. I have been with him at night. I take the night shift. My daughter takes the early morning shift. And he's much better now, but when he was a puppy, it was difficult because he would cry a lot. And my daughter would lie there on the sofa with him so that he would have comfort. And being a caregiver to anything is a joyful experience sometimes, because you're giving your love, you're giving your attention. And I hope that anyone out there who is a caregiver has listened and understood how much we appreciate you. And we know that some of the people on the Poetry Initiative have missed this. So we're sorry, but please post your poems in the chat or post your poems on your wall and give us the link so that we can see them. We're very sorry that we missed you, and we will be doing another one in July. I think, Melissa, what were we going to do?
I recommended that we should do it about impoverished females, and then you said, well, how about impoverished people? So that's what I suggested. So
Impoverished people, right?
the
Impoverished
struggles,
people.
struggles
The
that people have.
struggle of impoverished people. There are so many people today in the world who are not able to have a normal life.
Yep.
And they are in camps, they are in refugee camps. They have been thrown out of their homes for some reason, or they've been displaced by floods or other awful things.
The
And
pandemic impacted everybody
the
worldwide.
pandemic has destroyed some lives,
And jobs.
right, and jobs, right. And so we are going to focus on that. So everybody who's listening, we would like you to join us if you're a poet and would like to speak about this subject. And please let me know if you want me to put you in the chat, and we will. And so I am signing off for today. Our puppy has a behavior appointment.
Class.
Good luck with that.
Training, yeah, a training appointment to keep him mostly from biting. You know, it's like the biting is really bad. He has to learn, you know, how to tell us things. He's getting good about house training, but he has to learn how to tell us things. Anyway, I'm going to stop the recording now. And
I enjoyed being here. I enjoyed, talking about this very, very difficult